Welcome to the deep dive. So this time we're diving into Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck.
Yeah, looks like we've got a pretty hefty stack of reviews and articles about it.
We do. It seems like it really got people talking. I'm excited to dig in. What about you?
Definitely. It seems like this book really struck a chord with a lot of people when it first came out.
Yeah.
And it seems like even now it's still generating a lot of buzz.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
So let's try to unpack what it is about this book that makes it so interesting to so many people.
Okay.
One of the things I thought was really interesting right off the bat, just looking at some of the reviews, is that there's this whole conversation about the self-help genre.
Uh-huh.
Like this idea that it's kind of gotten saturated with this constant need for positivity.
Right.
Like, good vibes only.
Yes.
24/7.
Yeah.
And that's something that a lot of the reviewers picked up on.
You almost feel like you're not allowed to not be okay, right? Like you're supposed to just be.
Like there's something wrong with you if you're not like sunshine and rainbows all the time.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and that's just not realistic.
Right.
And so what's interesting about Manson's approach is that he's like, no.
Yeah.
He's not saying be negative, but he's saying like, let's be authentic here.
Right.
Life has good, it has bad, There's sunshine, there's storms.
Both. Yeah.
Pretending the storms aren't there doesn't actually help anyone.
Exactly. And, I think that really ties into what a lot of the reviewers latched onto as like the core message of this book, which is this whole idea of being really intentional about where you direct your energy.
Right.
And this is where he introduces this idea of choosing your fix.
Yeah.
Which is, kind of a bold way of putting it.
It gets your attention, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely makes you kind of sit up and take notice, right?
It does. And I think it struck a chord because it's like, okay, there is something to this.
Yep.
Like we all only have so much time and energy in a day.
Yeah.
You can't give a fuck about everything.
Exactly. You can't possibly care about everything equally. It's not feasible.
Right. And if we're constantly going around worrying about every little thing and trying to please everyone, we just end up so scattered and drained.
Yeah, you just burn out.
Yeah.
You just end up feeling exhausted and resentful.
Yes.
And ultimately, you're not really present for the things that actually do matter.
Exactly. So when he says not giving a fick, he's not saying be apathetic.
No, not at all.
He's saying get really clear about your priorities.
Yes.
And then be comfortable with being indifferent to the things that don't align with those.
Exactly. It's about making conscious choices about where you invest your energy.
Yeah.
Because when you choose not to give a feck about the things that don't actually matter to you, you then free up so much space for the things that do.
Absolutely. And this idea of being really deliberate about where you focus your energy, it seems like it applies to how we define and pursue success as well.
Right, because we get so caught up in this idea of like, what does it mean to be successful?
Yes. One reviewer even specifically mentioned this.
Okay.
How Manson kind of challenges us to embrace our own version of mediocrity.
Instead of chasing after somebody else's idea of what success looks like.
Yes.
Right?
Which can be kind of a tough concept to swallow in a world that's constantly telling us to strive for more.
It's true. It's like we're constantly being bombarded with these images of extraordinary success.
Yeah.
And it's easy to fall into that trap of thinking, oh, that's the only way to be happy. That's the only way to be fulfilled.
Right, exactly.
But what Manson so brilliantly points out is that like constantly chasing some external definition of success, often that leads to a lot of unhappiness.
It does.
And he gives a really great personal anecdote in the book about this, talking about how, he wanted to be a rock star.
Oh, yeah, I remember that part. That was so insightful.
Yeah, but he realized he didn't actually want the reality of being a rock star.
Right. Like the lifestyle.
The lifestyle.
The touring.
Yeah, the constant pressure.
The lack of privacy.
Exactly. He realized what he really craved was the feeling he thought being a rock star would bring.
Right, the image of it.
Exactly.
It's like he realized what he thought it would feel like to be a rock star.
Yes.
And what it would actually be like were two very different things.
And that's such an important distinction to make.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we're chasing a feeling.
Yeah.
We're chasing an image.
Right.
Rather than acknowledging like what actually matters to us.
What actually makes us tick.
Yes.
And that really ties into, I think, another major theme that a lot of the reviewers picked up on.
Okay.
Which is this idea of taking responsibility.
Yes. This is where I think Manson really digs deep into the psychology of how we approach challenges in our lives.
Right.
How we approach setbacks.
Yeah, those curveballs that life throws at us.
Exactly. And one reviewer actually shared a really interesting personal anecdote about this.
Okay.
About quitting their job.
Okay.
And how, they realized that even though it wasn't entirely their fault.
Right, like sometimes things happen.
Things happen.
That are outside of our control.
Exactly. But choosing to take responsibility for their part in it was actually incredibly empowering for them.
It's so easy to fall into that blame game, though.
Oh, absolutely.
Point fingers and be like, oh, this is why this happened.
This is all your fault.
Right, I'm the victim here.
Yeah, and that's what keeps us stuck, right?
It does.
Because when we're busy blaming other people or blaming circumstances, we're not actually taking any ownership.
It's like we relinquish control.
Exactly. And Manson's point is that even when things happen that are outside of our control, we still have the power to choose how we respond.
We do.
We always have that choice.
So it's not about saying, this is all my fault.
No.
It's about saying, okay, this is where I am. What can I learn from this situation?
What actions can I take to move forward?
Yes.
Exactly. And that is an incredibly powerful shift in perspective.
It is.
Because it puts you back in the driver's seat of your own life.
Yeah. And that actually kind of makes me think about another point that came up in some of these reviews, which is this idea of needing to be willing to challenge our own perspectives.
Yes.
Like our own closely held beliefs even. One reviewer even mentioned that there's kind of a stoic philosophy woven to the book.
Yeah, I definitely see that.
Like, not getting so caught up in things that you can't control.
Yes.
And really taking ownership for your own actions and reactions.
And he poses these really interesting questions in the book.
Oh, yeah. What were those? He said something like,
what if I'm wrong?
What if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
What would it mean if I was wrong?
Oh, I love that.
Right. Would being wrong create a better or worse problem than my current problem for both myself and others?
Those are really powerful questions to ask yourself.
It's so easy to just get stuck in our own heads.
Oh, it is?
Clinging to our beliefs and assumptions.
Our echo chambers.
Yes. Even when they might not be serving us.
Yeah.
So by asking that question, what if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
We open ourselves up to new possibilities.
To different perspectives, yeah.
Exactly. Maybe even better solutions.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I think in a world where everybody has an opinion.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And everybody thinks they're right.
Everybody's an expert these days.
Exactly. That kind of humility is incredibly refreshing.
It is.
It takes courage to admit when you're wrong.
It does. To say, I don't know, I could be wrong about this.
Yeah, exactly.
And that seems to be another big recurring theme, I think, in this book. This idea of just having the courage to be true to yourself.
100%. And then that leads us to, I think, what is perhaps Manson's most thought-provoking concept.
Okay.
Which is this idea of embracing our own mortality.
Yeah. Several reviewers brought this up.
It's not exactly a light topic.
No, not at all.
But it's interesting that he tackles it head on.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of self-help books shy away from anything remotely negative.
Right. They kind of want to keep things light and fluffy.
Upbeat and positive.
Exactly. But Manson argues that accepting the inevitability of death can actually make us more alive.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it seems kind of counterintuitive, right?
It does. Can you elaborate on that a bit? Because I think that's something that we could all wrap our heads around a little bit better.
Yeah, so think about it this way. If you're not constantly afraid of dying.
Okay.
If you can really accept that it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Then you can actually start focusing on really, truly living right now.
It's like it frees you up in a way.
Exactly. And for Manson, this all ties into the idea of letting go of this need to have some big, grand legacy.
Right, like I have to leave my mark on the world.
Exactly. He calls these immortality projects.
Okay.
All those things we do because we think they'll make us unforgettable.
Yeah.
But what he's saying is that real meaning.
Yeah.
It doesn't come from trying to make yourself immortal.
Right.
It comes from living a life that's true to you in the present moment.
So not to some, idea of who we think we should be.
Exactly.
But who we actually are.
Yeah. And I think that's really powerful.
It is. And, it's about finding those moments of joy.
Yes.
And those everyday experiences.
Yeah.
And not pinning all of our hopes on some distant future achievement.
Right. Once I achieve this, then I'll be happy.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's no, recognize that, this is it.
This is it.
We're here for a limited time.
Right.
As daunting as that can feel, that can actually be what pushes you to make the most of it. Yeah.
To get out there and actually live.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So, if we're not chasing immortality through achievements or possessions,
right,
then what does Manson say actually gives our lives meaning?
It really boils down to figuring out
Okay.
what are the values that are most important to you.
Okay.
And then figuring out how to live a life that actually reflects those values.
Okay.
And that's different for everyone.
Right.
For some people, it's about building really strong relationships.
Yeah.
Really connecting with other people.
Yeah, that's a good one.
For other people, maybe it's about contributing to something larger than themselves.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe that's through their work. Maybe that's volunteering.
Right.
Or maybe it's really finding those simple joys in life and appreciating them.
Right, like just enjoying each day as it comes.
Exactly. And really, being present.
Being present, yeah.
For all of it.
The good and the bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Embracing the full human experience.
So essentially it's about choosing your fix and making them count.
I love that. That's a great way to put it. It's about figuring out what actually matters to you.
Yeah.
And giving those things your energy.
And not being afraid to say,
yeah,
you know what, this other stuff, this doesn't really matter to me.
Exactly. And that's okay.
And that's okay. Yeah.
You don't have to be everything to everyone.
Right.
You're allowed to choose.
This has been such an interesting conversation.
It really has.
It's really got me thinking.
Me too.
About a lot of things.
Yeah.
It seems like this whole idea of the subtle art of not giving effect, it's not about being apathetic or indifferent, really.
It's really the opposite.
It's about being more mindful.
Yeah.
It's about being more intentional.
It's about living with intention.
Yeah.
And choosing where you direct your energy.
And I think ultimately it's about being more fully alive.
100%. Yeah, it's about recognizing that we're all human.
Right.
We all have our flaws. We all have limitations. But despite that, or maybe even because of that, we can still live really meaningful lives.
And focus on what matters.
Exactly.
Well, this book definitely gives you a lot to think about.
It really does.
If you could only choose to give effect about one thing in your life, what would it be? I'm going to be thinking about that for a while.
That's a really good question.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.